The Labour Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, has demanded the release of Cabinet Office guidance about a peerage for Evgeny Lebedev. That, of course, is the newspaper owner and son of a former KGB spy.
Boris Johnson denies that he intervened to override security concerns in the appointment of the Russian oligarch to the House of Lords. The Deputy Labour Leader, Angela Rayner, joins us now. Very good morning to you. Good to see you this morning. What do you think went on behind the scenes?
Well, this is the problem. We don't know because the Prime Minister, had accusations from his senior advisor that he intervened. The Commission rejected the peerage for Lebedev, and it's clear that the Prime Minister overruled that against our national security advice. So that's why we're calling for that advice to be published so that we can get to the bottom of it, because when it comes to national security, the Prime Minister should not be disregarding that advice.
So what would be the worst-case scenario, then, in terms of bad news for the government? What would you expect to see that might shake them up?
Well, I think that the Prime Minister has clearly intervened in this case because he's a good friend of his and he's a known associate. We can't have that. When it comes to national security, if we're giving advice, if the Prime Minister's given advice, then he should be following that advice, and we need to know why he didn't follow that advice and he chose to intervene in this case. It's very serious if our security services say to the Prime Minister, this is not a good idea. If the Commission reject that peerage, then why did the Prime Minister feel that he personally should intervene? We need that publication of that information now so that we know exactly what happened in this case.
How significant do you think it is that this guy's dad was in the KGB?
I think it is of concern. There's been many allegations around interference in British politics, and we need to get to the bottom of it. Why Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, felt that he needed to disregard that national security advice. That advice is there to protect Britain and protect our interests, and the Prime Minister intervened and decided that he disregarded that. That's why it's important we get that information today so that we know exactly what happened in this case. Boris Johnson has a personal relationship with Lord Lebedev, and it's clear that for me, that's intervened in his judgment and disregarded the national security advice, and that's why we're saying we need to get to the bottom of it.
Do you think there is a situation where, if that was published or released, that you would call for Lord Lebedev to be stripped of his peerage?
Well, this is why it's important we understand exactly why our security services had concerns around that and why the Commission rejected that peerage. It's very important that people have faith in British politics and that, people are put into the Lords or people are elected into Parliament in the interests of the British public and the British people, not through personal relationships. And if the Commission rejected that and the national security advice was very clear not to appoint, then why did the Prime Minister decide that he disregarded that?
Lord Lebedev is a socialite as well as other things, famously holds a number of parties. We know also that he invites people to his Tuscan or Italian property as well. Are you absolutely sure that nobody in the Labour Party has been invited to those social occasions which might cause embarrassment?
Well, there's certainly no pictures of any Labour MPs getting off a flight after being at one of his villas and parties. And I think the serious point here is that, people...
Sorry, Angela, there might not be any pictures, but I'm just, if there's...
I'm not aware
are there
of any
social connections that might embarrass the Labour... if your criticism is that Boris Johnson had a friendly relationship with this guy and went to social occasions on his invitation, are there Labour politicians in the same position?
I'm not aware of any Labour politicians that were invited to his villa, etc. But the central point here is not that. The point is the national security advice was very clear to the Prime Minister and he chose to disregard that. And that's why we want the transparency to see exactly what happened here and why the Prime Minister disregarded national security in the interests of a personal friendship. This is dangerous for our country. We need a Prime Minister who always puts the interests of the British people first. And that's why we need to get to the bottom as why a senior advisor to the Prime Minister has made it very clear that the Prime Minister disregarded that advice that he was given by our national security services and decided to elevate Lebedev into the Lords despite the Commission and despite the security advice.
Can I ask you a completely different question, which is in the air at the moment? As you know, it's almost all politicians of your ilk are being asked it. Could you define what a woman is?
Well, I think, you know, there seems to be a huge debate at the moment, and I think this is quite damaging. It's very clear that we need to support people who are going through, young people who may be going through, you know, challenges that they face. And I don't think it's for politicians or commentators to decide their fate or decide what should be happening with them. I think people need support and people need to feel safe, and that includes women and includes people who are transitioning. And I think this debate has got very, very, you know, it's a Twitter debate. It's a debate that seems to be degraded to whether or not what genitalia you have, and I think it doesn't help anybody to do that, actually. Well, I think what we need to be doing is supporting our young people into living very valued, you know, yes, happy lives. And I think that the debate that's currently being had in the social media bubble is really not helping anybody.
I do think that's a very interesting overview, but it is an overview, and I just noticed that it means you haven't actually answered the question. What do you think defines a woman?
Well, I mean, I know what I define myself and I know that how I identify, but I know that people who are going through transition, people who have, you know, doubts about who they are and what they feel about themselves, it's very damaging for them if we degrade it down to what genitalia somebody has or whether somebody has a cervix or not. I don't think that's the, you know, I think it debases the debate around that, and actually I don't think it should be conducted on social media. I think we should be supporting our young people, leaving professionals to help people going through trauma that they may be going through or challenges in their lives, and I don't think it helps for us to have a debate at that sort of level.
Just before you go, Angela Rayner, because obviously a definition of a woman took up quite a lot of time, but can you tell us, because we're expecting fines today in the wake of the Partygate investigation, are you still calling for, in the middle of, obviously, a conflict, for the Prime Minister to resign?
If the Prime Minister has broke his rules, which it's pretty clear to me that he has, and the Prime Minister gets fined because of he went to parties when other people couldn't see their dying loved ones, then I absolutely think the Prime Minister should resign. And I think it's important to know that regardless of what's happening internationally and within our country, the whole House is the ones that make decisions, and MPs make decisions in their interests of their constituents. It's clear to me that Boris Johnson made in his self-interest and didn't look after the country or look after the people who were going through very big struggles during the pandemic, and he chose to laugh and party while the rest of the country was following the rules. So I don't think the Prime Minister is fit to be Prime Minister if he gets fined, and if the truth comes out that he actually was partying. I think it's disgraceful, and I don't think anything can stop us from being very clear and holding him to account for that. People are responsible for their actions, and the Prime Minister is no different.
Angela Rayner, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.